Right, welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are located on this globe. Um, I wish everyone very welcome here to our Ignite Roundup, and I'm very happy that my colleague Liam here is here, and Jussi. And could you please introduce yourself, Liam? Go.
Yep, so I'm Liam, Microsoft MVP, have been for 12 years now, and I'm also the product owner of everything security related at Rencore, which is very vast.
That sounds quite broad, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of a broad topic, but anything security related, I am the man. That's what I do.
Cool. And Jussi?
Hey all, my name is Jussi. I'm based in Helsinki, Finland. I'm a Microsoft MVP for about 5 years now, I think, and second year regional director as well. And I've got a long and dark background in SharePoint. I still, from time to time, I get to work with SharePoint, but oftentimes I seem to find myself in Azure and Microsoft 365 as well.
Cool. Then a short introduction to who I am. I'm Erwin van Hunen, just like Liam. I work at Rencore. I'm the product owner for transformation, which is a relatively broad topic too, as such. And I work a lot. I mean, I know you see already from like years ago, actually, when the time there still was this training called MCM, dinosaur thing. Fun times, crazy times. Yeah. Let's just move on with today. I would like to do a bit of householding messages here. If you have questions during this webinar, which will be a panel shape, we will just start to discuss all kinds of topics here. If you have any questions to us, just use the Q&A system of Zoom. There is a chat, we are aware of that. We try to monitor the Q&A more than the chat. So use the Q&A because it helps us actually to bring up questions among the speakers here, and we can mark them as answered, etc. So it's just a bit easier for us. So that's effectively all the logistics behind this. And let's get up and running. Ignite 2018. I was there last week. I'm still recovering actually from a jet lag. I'm notoriously bad, or you could say good, at handling a jet lag. It takes me at least a day per hour time difference. So I'm like still off. I woke up this morning at 5, and those that know me know that it is a very uncommon thing to do for me to wake up at 5. So how are you guys doing?
For me, I had a bit of a problem when I was flying to Orlando about, 10, 12 days ago. I missed my connecting flight from Helsinki to Chicago. So I was stranded in Chicago on a Saturday evening. It was maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And our flight to Orlando already departed. The next 2 flights were full. So we figured, yeah, let's fly to Miami, rent a car from there, drive to Orlando because it's only about 400 kilometers. But then they made a mess with our luggage. So we landed in Miami at 11 in the evening on Saturday, and we had to be there on Sunday for the pre-workshop stuff.
Right.
And we landed there at 11, and they told us, well, actually your luggage is in the transit area, and that will move on Sunday morning with the next flight. So we spent the night driving from Miami to Orlando. We got to the hotel at 5:30 in the morning. So we kind of lost that one night of sleep that I was kind of hoping to get. and I got exactly 72 minutes of sleep before I had to go to the Orlando airport to pick up my luggage.
Wow.
Then I went back to Ignite and actually started the conference. So regarding jet lag, I'm kind of having double jet lag now, but I'm getting better.
Good. And Liam, you're located in the US, so for you it should be no problem.
Yeah, so this was easy life. This was the very first time that I actually didn't physically attend. I normally attend, and you've seen me speak at Ignite and everything else, but I chose to stay at home just for work commitments. And actually it was a different experience this time because I thought I would really miss it, and it would kind of like, it wouldn't be the same experience. And of course it wasn't, because I wasn't there with colleagues and friends and everything else. But as far as content goes, I think they did a pretty good job of showing the content online. And I never had any technical difficulties, which you often get when you broadcast, to such a large audience. But I got to watch sessions and catch up. Obviously, avid Twitter person anyway, so that's where you get most of the announcements, not from the sessions from Twitter. So yeah, it was a very different experience. Wake up, walk to my office downstairs, relax, no stress, no heat, The air conditioning worked amazingly well. You know,
Right.
so it was nice. It was nice.
You didn't miss the excitement, the buzz.
Well, I did. I mean, there's an element of like, I'm the same as you guys. I mean, you go to an Ignite conference, maybe you're speaking, maybe you're not, but you never attend loads of sessions. You end up attending a couple of them, and then you just kind of hang out with friends. And the only time that I really missed it was, I was telling you a bit earlier, is when you went to Universal Studios. And I'd forgotten that was that night. And then I picked up my phone and it was on Twitter. It was like, oh yeah, in line to go on the Hulk ride. I'm like, oh, could have been at Universal. And I'm not, I'm sitting in my office, like working at night. And I'm thinking, I could be at Universal right now.
Right. Yeah.
Like that was the bit that was upsetting for me.
Yeah. So for me, a change that I really liked this year when compared to last year. Now, I am from the Nordics. I live in Sweden. Warm weather is not my thing. Last year, they had the South Concourse and the West Concourse, which meant that you had to walk. You had to actually go outside. And every time you stepped out through those doors, there was a smack in your face. And yeah, that was like a 10-minute walk, maybe a bit more, to get from one concourse to the other. That was not a very pleasant experience. And I was very happy to find out that this year, basically, the majority of the things was actually focused in the West Concourse, including the expo and all the sessions. It's a very long building. If you go from one side to the other side, that's still quite a considerable walk, but it was all in the same building. And I really appreciated that.
I really like the new layout, the new setup. And I found it interesting on my behalf that after the sessions ended for a day, there was usually a type of happy hour with a product group or meeting with friends in a restaurant nearby. Somebody would say, yeah, should we walk there? I would open my Maps application on the phone and say, well, it's 800 meters and it's quite hot outside. So should we take
Exactly.
And you feel so lazy. Then you come back home. I'm based in Finland. It is about +3 Celsius. So
Right.
I think that's about -200 Fahrenheit. And I go out and I'm freezing, but I'm not complaining because it's actually quite nice.
Yeah. I had to actually clear the ice from the windows this morning of my car.
Yep.
And I see that Teresa actually agrees with Liam that her chair was really comfy as well, sitting in the office with a cup of tea, watching the keynote.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is a very comfy. I mean, the keynote stress, getting into the keynote, be there very early to get a bit of a good seat, and then realize that you're still watching someone on stage, but you're actually looking at a big screen watching someone on stage.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like it's you move somewhere to watch a streaming keynote. Well, yeah, it's an interesting concept. So overall feeling when we look at the announcements, to me, the announcements that they made in regards to SharePoint and Office 365 or Microsoft 365 were very much, I would say, usability and end user focused, and not that much like from because I'm hardcore, or deep inside, I'm a developer. And they were not that much like, oh, okay, we have this wonderful new APIs or this new, no, it was more like, see what we're doing with the modern sites and see how we're optimizing this and see how we're introducing that, etc. So it was very much, for me at least, that's how it felt. The majority of the announcements were user-based, user entrance. And I actually see here that Matthias Einig suddenly pops up and disappears again.
Sorry about that.
Oh, he's gone again.
I just wanted to listen in. Sorry about interrupting.
Okay.
Apparently, I'm a moderator.
For those that don't know, Matthias Einig is the CEO of Rencore.
So to me, this speaks in real language. Matthias needs to look after you guys, that you're really working.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, he's just secretly checking in. He was trying to check in that we're doing it properly. He gave himself away. He gave himself away by showing his face.
What I'll do now, by the way, I'll stop the sharing, which probably means that you will all see us full screen. So don't just that you know that. So the video will go big now. So there we go.
So I think along with you, Erwin, I think it was very much announcements, at least in the SharePoint space, where we all sit, or we have done for years, that it was really much, it wasn't focused on really IT pros, realistically, it really wasn't. It wasn't focused on devs. It was really focused on end user expectations and better user experience. I mean, admittedly, you did see some of the announcements, like we would all know probably more than anybody else, that the amount of effort that Microsoft put under the covers to make some of those things work, but it wasn't really an advantage to like us as a dev or us as an IT pro, because it was, hey, we can do column formatting, really cool stuff in a list. Like, that's fantastic, but like, I don't care about that. I think it's cool, but like, it's not something that I'm going to have to worry about, you know, but I think for over the years, when you do a comparison between like a tech ed and an Ignite, that tech ed was very much around the technical new things that were happening, whereas Ignite tends to be not as heavy on the technical side, really. There's a few sessions that you get, and then the rest of it is really around end user and delivering to it, basically to Microsoft customers, to enterprise clients, to you as the end. I can see Vesa pinging things up.
Exactly. So I was actually thinking of saying here, and so Vesa, welcome. We made you a panelist now. So if you want to jump in, and knowing you a bit, you might actually do that. So we'll see. But there he is.
There he is.
It's just a matter of time.
He's muted, no video. Sounds good.
Yeah. One of those secret people again spying on us.
Exactly.
Hey, there we go.
There he is. Hey.
The man, the myth. So
He's still on mute though.
He's still muting, or maybe on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, I made it on purpose. Okay. Sorry, I was just dropping in for listening, like Matthias. Come on. So,
what it felt, for instance, if you think about it, the modern sites and the modern pages, they're cool and wonderful and very useful. But compared to the functionality with classic sites, they do have still some catching up to do. And that's what you see what's happening right now with the announcements they make. They're effectively catching up. They're announcing functionality, for instance, now with the web parts, the web part to web part communication thing that we actually had since I don't know how long ago already in classic web parts. And now it's coming back in modern web parts. And yeah, so they're catching up slowly. Audience targeting. We've had that for years, and that was a big demand. People wanted that, and they implemented. Now, I haven't looked in how it is implemented. I dearly hope it's done differently from what it used to be.
You wanna know?
Got? I'm gonna say Vesa would know.
It's different than it was. It's different than it was. So that's one of the things, and that's, I would have to say, it's absolutely fair feedback. It's always good to hear that people are talking about they, because I'm part of they, so that's always scary. But one of the things, obviously, we want to be super open and transparent. What are we investing our time right now? And obviously, there are areas which are still missing from the modern, and we want to be open and transparent that we're addressing those. And audiences is a good example. The classic audiences never worked in SharePoint Online, really, due to technical reasons. And now we're fixing that by re-implementing the whole engine. So it will take time, but it's better than what it was. And that's what one of the thinking points with the modern experience is, absolutely, is that, yes, we understand that we're still catching up on classic, but when we do catch up, it has to be better than it was in classic. So that,
and I agree, it is better. I mean, the whole page editing experience is like so far ahead in modern compared to the classic page experience. And that actually shows when, well last week, Wes and I did a session about transformation, and we had to build some classic sites with classic web parts and things on them. That was a pain. that was a pain. It's like, and well, besides the fact that you get all these panes sliding out, but it was really a pain to do. It was really not a fun experience, I have to admit.
But it didn't feel painful from 2003 to about 2016.
Fair enough.
We got so used to having all of these pains. Now we get the new stuff and we will, oh, this is how it should have been. And you kind of forget the old stuff.
Exactly. There's a question here from Brett, actually, in the Q&A. He says, with the focus on end user, do you think they are forgetting large enterprises? My opinion, no, absolutely not.
Was that the official Microsoft answer from Beta?
No, my opinion personally is not. Take now, for instance, the hub sites, which is like a sort of sub navigation structure you can create, and now that information is now also exposed in the tenant administration side, and you can filter things on hub sites. You can do the association there. It's not located it's actually brought up to a level where an administrator would take action and decisions about structure instead of having a owner of a site making the decision. So no, I mean that's a small example, and I think no, I don't believe that they're forgetting about it. It's in the back of their heads, and I even think Vesa thinks this. That I hope so.
So
I hope so.
yes. So how would I put it in that? So sure, if we think about the SharePoint development in the past, I'm trying to be short on this answer. We used to actually implement stuff for 3 years and then release a new version, and then we had considered the enterprise scenarios, end user scenarios, developer scenarios, everything else. Now that we're releasing a new version in every single week, it gets more complicated because obviously whenever there's a new feature, we first want to get the feedback in. So we prioritize the end user experience. So we get the end user looking nicely. And then at that point, quite often people are like, where's the API? And it's like, no, it's coming. The API is coming. But we started by providing the end user experience first so that we can get the feedback in rather than, again, waiting for multiple months to get the functionality complete on multiple sites. And then when we release that, enterprises or developers come back and say, well, that's not good enough. So we get the feedback immediately. And it is a massive change from a mentality perspective. For me, it's the minimal viable product approach, but it makes sense.
Sorry, if a small remark, Vesa, your microphone is pointing to probably the built-in microphone or your camera microphone in Zoom. It's not picking up your headset microphone, so you sound a bit distant.
Yeah, regarding
Go ahead, Jussi.
The question from Brad on if the focus is on end users, partially yes, but what I often hear from large enterprises as well, they will go, yeah, we love the modern sites, but it would be great to have a custom footer in here. So they often also have the UX related big asks that are mandatory because of their branding guidelines dictate what needs to happen on a site. So I would say it's not black and white. It's more like the larger organizations, they often have really specific asks, but then they often have the same type of asks that the end users like as well.
I'm going to take a different tact because, like, obviously we're just talking about SharePoint and SharePoint Online and branding and everything else. But I think from an enterprise perspective, Microsoft did a great job because the first problem you've got with enterprises is actually trying to get them onto SharePoint Online in the first place, because not all large enterprises are willing to make the investment into any type of cloud service like that. And so with the investments that Microsoft made over this year and announced at Ignite from a security perspective, that's squarely aimed at large enterprises. That's really, that's what it's focused for. So if the idea being, if Microsoft can get security tools in place that mean that large enterprises will say, hey, you know what, let's do it. Let's do Microsoft 365. Then everything else is just a bonus. So I think from certain areas in the Microsoft 365 stack, it's not focused to enterprises as such, but the other areas that need them to get on are. And so that would just be my perspective. I got that as a takeaway from some of the bits and pieces from watching the session. That really there was a big focus on that.
And really, if you think about the enterprise scenario, for whenever the customization or the extensibility, or whenever the service is providing a end-to-end enterprise scenario, it has much more stickiness into it. So that means that people are actually more willing to use that because enterprises are pushing, for example, a default welcome page and everything else. With SharePoint, we've been there from day one. And coming back on what Liam said, it really depends again on which product we're looking into. SharePoint itself, absolutely enterprise scenario, much more ready than many of the other products in Office 365. Because if we just let's say random example, not naming any products because somebody's going to be angry if I do that, but in some of the other products, there's no admin capabilities, there's no admin PowerShells, there's no admin ways of controlling the end user experience. In SharePoint, we've been there from day one due to historical reasons as well. So. And the microphone is probably much better now.
It is actually much better, much better. Yes. Liam, I think you wanted to answer a question that was asked in the Q&A.
Yeah, so it's a question I actually get quite frequently. This one's from Elizabeth, where they're on premises, you have SharePoint version, whatever, and you're moving to SharePoint Online. And of course, the difficulty is when you're on premises, you would probably have dev, test, stage, UAT, and into prod. And it's very simple to segment it by just building a dev farm, a test farm, a prod farm. And I work with lots of clients that do that. But when you get to 365 and SharePoint Online, it's much more complicated because you either go with multiple tenants or you go with multiple site collections. And that development model kind of changes. And I know from my perspective, I've had clients that have done both. Normally, those that are larger can afford to have multiple tenants, whereas most people have one tenant and then they'll have separate site collections and then they'll create the customizations and then replicate them somehow, whether we're using P&P to actually do that or some of the tooling. So I suppose that's the question. Like, what would you like recommend as an approach? Because I've used both. And I've done different ways. If I'm doing SharePoint framework development, it's a piece of cake. I could use something like SP-Go, and I can target specific tenants to do it or site collections. But I mean, what's the best approach? So do we target Vesa first, or do we go the other way?
I've had customers who have security as the top priority. They will go to Office 365 if security can be done exactly like they want it to be done. And those type of customers, they are perfectly fine having multiple tenants. They might have 10 tenants, one Azure AD, and permissions are super strict. Everything is logged and audited. And they don't see the problem in replicating stuff between the tenants because they have a strict process in there. But then more often, for maybe smaller organizations or for organizations that are not going to Office 365 with security as the priority number one, they are perfectly happy in having one or maybe two tenants. The other one is for testing and playground sandbox stuff for IT and devs. The other one is production and test and UAT as well.
Okay.
Talking about security, I heard a very interesting comparison during Ignite where someone reasoned like, but is my data secure? And the answer that person got, or the counter question that person got was like, so if you have a lot of money, where do you store that? Yeah, on the bank. Why? Because it's safe. So why do you think it's different with your data? Because many people still believe that the data on-prem is actually more safe than it is in the cloud. And it's actually the opposite. Mm-hmm. That might feel counterintuitive because you say like, okay, I don't have control over it, but you know, Microsoft really cannot afford. They cannot afford to put your data at risk. So they will do so much more than you will be able to do in order to protect your data. Mm-hmm. So that's I thought that was a very fascinating comparison with the bank.
Exactly, but on that one, just a small joke, because that was a brilliant discussion, except in that case, the customer came back and said, well, it's actually might be safer in our case. And everybody, I was having that discussion and everybody's like, what do you mean? And it was a large US-based military manufacturer. So,
exactly.
Okay, maybe in your case, this is
okay. There might be a little exception there, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Disconnect from the internet, that's the only answer.
Yeah.
I often use the analogy that if companies I'm having a discussion with somebody and they tell, well, we don't want to go to the cloud because we don't trust them, or we don't like paying for this and this. I might ask them, so do you do your own electricity and water as well? Or do you buy that as a service? And they will always go, yeah, we buy that as a service. Until one day I went to the local company that produces water in one of the cities in Finland, and they said, yeah, we do our own water. So that's why we need to have our own data center.
Yeah.
Fair enough. There's a question here in the Q&A. It says, the question is, are hub sites available in SharePoint 2019? And if not, this is on the roadmap. The thing that we have to point out, and then Vesa, if I speak for you, just correct me if I'm wrong there, but keep in mind that it sounds weird, but SharePoint 2019 is already old when compared to SharePoint Online. It's a fork that was made from the code of SharePoint Online months ago. And that is now being released as SharePoint 2019. So you see things in SharePoint Online that were not available in SharePoint 2019, and it's still pretty unclear if they will come in SharePoint 2019. And from what I understand, hub sites are not available in SharePoint 2019. Modern sites are, but hub sites are not. Will they come? Well, that's something Vesa can maybe answer if it's on the roadmap. But
so they will come at some point. Let's put it this way. So, but it's when and where and on which version and whatever. So right now in 2019, no. Whenever there will be some updates at some point in on-premises, potentially yes, but we can't really sign off on that one either. So I can't promise anything because I don't control that. But whenever the fork for 2019 happened, the functionality was not GA in the SharePoint Online, so it's not in the SharePoint 2019.
Oh.
So.
It's funny when back in the old days before public cloud services, we as IT pros and devs, we would get a new release of something, let's say SharePoint 2007, and we would be happy with it for 3 years. And maybe we got a service pack with some new features. Now we get monthly updates to Office and Windows 10 and Office 365. And if something is not part of the on-prem release now, we are too spoiled and kind of hoping that everything should be in here that I've got in the cloud as of today.
Yeah, fair enough. Indeed.
I like the word spoiled. Spoiled.
We're spoiling you. We're spoiling you too much. Yes.
There's a question here from Danilo asking, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but about customization of pages in SharePoint. I can answer. Part of that is that with the PnP core library, we have an API for page customization. So the PnP provisioning engine does that, for instance. So you can use that also from code if you want to. So there is a way of customizing the pages. If you look at how the page model works behind the scenes, there's actually data in a field on a list item. That's actually what the whole SharePoint modern page is all about. And we have a library that allows you to add sections and add web parts and etc. to it. When it comes to out-of-the-box support of that API, of that functionality, again, I have to look at the senior program manager there.
So for
sorry, that's the risk of joining. Why did you join? Yeah.
So modern pages, there will be a graph API for modern pages, the first version, alpha version, relatively soon. So that's pretty much the status.
Yeah.
So it will be relatively simple when we start, but then it's a start for getting
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know if this was still DNA or not, so that's why I pointed at you. Because,
yeah.
So.
But the PnP tooling, if you really need to do, let's say, C# .NET framework based customizations and modifying pages and structure of the pages, absolutely doable. If you need to have customizations on pages, headers, footers, placeholders, whatever, yes, absolutely supported. It really depends again what the customization of pages mean.
Right. Right. Now, what I found an interesting announcement is the fact that we will now be able to have SPFX web parts as tabs in Teams.
Okay, now we're talking, so I'm putting on my Teams sticker.
Okay.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been waiting for it, and let me put on my Rencore glasses as well. There we go.
Nice.
There we go.
I don't get paid for this. So the SPFX web parts in tabs and Teams, that's probably one of the #1 asks that I'm getting from companies, that why can't we reuse these in Teams? And I'm really happy that we're finally eventually at some point getting it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. And actually, so I was fortunate enough to be actually being able to play with the technology and build some web parts that can run as a tab in Teams, and it's very simply implemented. It's very easy to do. So it's not that you have to build up a whole new skill set or something like that. You just build your SPFX web part as you used to build your SPFX web part. And you provision your solution to the app catalog, and that's basically what you do. And then you have to make some switches, but whatever, then they end up as a tab in Teams, and that is actually very smooth. I liked it.
I didn't look that deeply into the session on that. So will it be so that as a dev, if I'm creating a new SPFX web part in the future, while I'm generating the project, that I can actually choose that what's the context or what's the target? Is it SharePoint or Teams or both? Or can I get any existing SPFX web part and simply embed those?
Well, I don't know where the technology is going. I used a very early build. When using that build, it was a relatively minor change to an existing web part to make it Teams enabled.
So, okay, let me answer this one. So what it means is that you will need to upgrade to 1.7 because there will be a changes on the base classes. But basically, after upgrading to 1.7, you do not need to do anything more than just deploy your web part, and that's it.
There we go.
Work in both sides. There's no additional manual things to get done. You will need to get the web part, at least when we start, into preview in 1.7, ETA by end of this year, hopefully late October, early November, could be delayed. But anyway, when we start the dev preview, you will need to get the Teams manifest deployed to the channel, channel, is it a channel? No, Teams team, where you want to use that. So it doesn't automatically extract all of the web parts from the app catalog of your SharePoint tenant to be available on the Teams. That's the only thing what you need to get available. But really simple. No, it's the same code, no changes on a code perspective, and you get access on the Teams context and also the SharePoint context in your web.
One of the discussions I've had frequently, especially at Ignite last week, but even before that, has been that what's holding us from actually building everything around Teams now, because I can add tabs, I can add my SharePoint stuff in there in the future web parts as well. Why do I need to go to SharePoint again? And I think Ignite did a pretty good job in positioning SharePoint for the modern stuff and Teams as the productivity hub.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I do need to apologize because I wasn't planning to actually join on this. I need to move to another meeting because the Redmond people are waking up. So
it was great having you here.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So, I will need to use some unknown alias next time when I'm trying to...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We'll find you. We'll find you.
Okay, thank you. Please
Thank
continue.
you. Thank you, Vesa.
Bye.
Bye. So, Dirk asks, what did you guys think about the MS Groups session with Christoph Wiesinger? For me, everything from Teams to Yammer kind of fitted perfectly together in the strategy, but the fact that there are investments in groups showing up even more nicely in Outlook, well, I haven't seen that session, so I cannot comment on that one, unfortunately.
What I have on all of my machines, I downloaded all of the session slide decks. So now when I'm in meetings and having discussion on stuff, and somebody asks me something like this, which I admit I didn't attend that specific session, I open my PowerShell, go to the directory with all the slides, and try searching quickly. What's the PowerPoint? What's in there? Yeah. But the thing between Teams and Yammer and SharePoint, I think it's been about a year since we got the inner loop, outer loop kind of diagram that we've all seen. And that was frequently used last week at Ignite as well, but not as much maybe. And I think the whole groups thing, it's still, of course, very relevant, but I would say mostly because of Teams nowadays, not because of groups-based distribution lists, for example.
Right. So the whole concept of hub sites, I find fascinating because it has a lot of functionality, but in my opinion, there are also quite some limitations because it's being like announced as a way to organize your site structure and with subsites, if you want to call them like that, instead of subsites. Although now we can actually create modern subsites in team sites. That has now been introduced. So there's like where to go, and then many people ask like, I would like to have like more levels, because many people, including me for a long time, was like, we're using the URLs as a structure. So you have a site collection /subsite/subsite, and with the hub site that sort of breaks open because it's all site collections that you hook up in the subsite. It's only one level effectively. What do you guys think of this? But
Yeah, so this is something that over the past few years, like when I first moved to the US, the company I work for, we focused heavily on large scale intranets and public facing sites. And so you were kind of built in a certain way. And lots of clients ended up building intranets that were very deep structures. So you ended up having like site collection all the way down. And sometimes they were like ridiculously deep structures that were being built. And then it became complicated from a management perspective, security perspective, deployment of assets perspective, all that kind of stuff. And so it's been interesting to see that shift into, we go back to site collections, which if you think from the old days was very much like the old areas that we used to kind of have and things like that, go back to that site collection. I think it's a good move. Obviously, it just means that from a business perspective, there's a lot more to worry about as far as architecturally making sure that things are going to work seamlessly. But Microsoft, in all fairness, have done a good job, like you said, with the hub sites where you connect everything together. And I think that's nice, just because too often, by the time people have got to a tenant, so personally, my personal view is that hub sites are the answer to Microsoft allowing site collections to just grow and be randomly built in an Office 365 tenant. Because that's really what happened. You ended up, like I had a client I did an audit for, I went through the whole thing. They said they had 85 site collections. When I actually did a PowerShell script, there was 500 site collections because most of those were teams backed or groups backed or whatever else. And so suddenly there's a panic because they're significant. And of course, it's just that organic growth. So hub sites allow me to kind of logically group them together in some central way. And I think that's a good thing. I only think that's a good thing going forward. I think it's still limited in the way it kind of works, but I think it's a good logical design and a good step forward. But it does need good thinking up front instead of just, hey, we're going to whack one in and just tie it together and it's all good to go.
Because one of the argumentations against hub sites and pro sub sites, if you want to call it that, is just that people want to control like the groups and access on the highest possible level, being the site collection, and then it automatically drills down to the whole structure, and that you don't have with hub sites. They're basically separate site collections that are just sort of very loosely tied to each other, semi-loosely. But I mean, there's of course the themes that drill down, and they announce now there will be a hub site footer that will be pushed out throughout your hub site structure. There will be audience targeting in the hub site navigation, which is also good. So some people can see this link, some people will not be able to see the link. I mean, they're doing a good thing as such, I think, with hub sites. There are some limitations. You can, I think currently the limit is 50. I think maximum 50, and they're announced to increase it to 100. Which still might be not enough for some organizations, especially the larger tenants. It might still be too limited. On the other hand, what is your scope of control? Can you really control so many like hub sites with some other site collections all talking to each other? It's going to be complex.
I think I saw in one of the numerous Twitter tweets or blog posts that one of the announcements was that for hub sites, they'll introduce the approval in there. So if somebody wants to create a hub site from here, you can actually enforce approval before it actually happens.
Yeah, and there is also an approval coming for, you want to associate your site with that hub site? That needs to be approved first. So there will be a flow there, indeed. But I like also with site scripts and site designs is that you can, and that's all the whole thing with like self-service site creation. Everyone can create site collections like they feel they need. Is that if you hooked a site script to a site design, that site script can auto hook up this site collection to a specific hub site. So you sort of enforce the structure by allowing people just to create a site collection. It will be automatically be part of that structure, which is, I think, personally, quite nice. There's a question here from Melissa in the Q&A. So, will we be able to utilize cross-site collection list access to align with the new hub site recommendation experience with Microsoft? Cross-site collection list access. I'm trying to understand.
I'm getting a blank here as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Is it cross-site collection list access?
Is that just Is that just the lists and being able to utilize the lists in the other one by using the cross-site collection?
Okay, calendar integration. She adds here calendar integration.
Yeah. So kind of utilizing them across. I mean, right now, nothing's been removed from the regular site collection kind of like list access that already exists.
No. It's
it still exists. It's just because effectively a hub site is really a site collection anyway.
Yeah, there's nothing specific. There's a little flag that says this is a hub site,
right.
and then the other site collection that points to the hub site is just has another flag says like point to that hub site, and that's everything effectively.
Yeah.
And if you see the navigation, the top the hub site navigation is effectively the top navigation of the hub site itself. So basically, what the other site collections do, they connect to the hub site, retrieve the top navigation, and inject that in the UI in the top. So that basically what it's there's no magical scary things or anything happening behind the scenes. It's actually just utilizing existing SharePoint constructs.
Yep.
So indeed, there's a you seem to be very much into Teams. I sadly have to admit, or sadly, no, it's not sadly. Within Rencore, we actually use Slack, the big competitor. But what about private channels and Teams? Any news about that often missed end user feature?
I lost my team sticker. Let me put it on again.
You can only answer the question with the sticker on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm switching modes here. The private channel thing, meaning that I would have a team that people could join, but then underneath in the team, I would have channels, and one or more of those channels would have different permissions than the members of the team are actually getting. I think on user voice, that's for Teams, that's probably the number one or number two ask at the moment. And I think the latest answer is that they're working on it, on figuring out if it would be feasible, how it could be done, or at least thinking about it. But I don't think there's any promise or delivery date or anything of sorts when or if it would be available. But I know people are really asking for it.
Okay. Yeah. And they do listen. They want to make it successful.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a question actually in the chat here from Ashish. When will the classic experience be completely replaced by modern UX, specifically for on-premise? I don't necessarily believe that the classic experience will disappear. It might disappear from the UI as such that you will not be able in a future version, and I don't think that will be SharePoint 2019, but a future on-prem version, you might only be able to create by default a modern site. Whereas if you still want to, can go behind the scenes and create a classic site. And I would be very surprised if they take the whole classic site concept away. There's still a place for that at times.
I don't think there's an upside in removing classic from whatever comes after SharePoint 2019 for on-prem.
No.
Because there's so much legacy. And it would probably make sense to just keep it there because we know it works and the code works. And at some point, simply maybe deprecate that in the cloud and enforce that way the use of modern.
But you know how Microsoft deprecates. That means it'll still be there for the next 20 years.
It's just hidden and you need to know the secret PNP API to use it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, Impapath is deprecated, but it's still there.
For years to come.
For years to come, that's right.
Yeah, the deprecation is wildly differently implemented within the Microsoft organization. Sometimes it means like it's gone, and sometimes it means it might be gone, or sometimes it means we do not support it anymore. So deprecation is a broadly vague concept.
And you may wake up one day and it's actually gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Surprise! It's gone.
Sandbox solutions, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. There's a question here in the chat from Steve. If I have a hub site with multiple associated site collections, just by adding users as members of the hub site does not grant them access to the content of the related site collections. Is that correct? That's correct. It doesn't do that. So if I want to see all content in the hub from related site collections, do I need to manually add, I assume, the same users to all related site collections to view all content in the hub? Yeah. It's still the security model of SharePoint is still enforced. The permission model is still enforced. So yes, it requires that you have access to the content and able to see the content. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I find a lot of similarities with SharePoint and all of the modern stuff, as well as Windows 10 with all of the modern UIs. If something doesn't work out, let's say in the Windows 10 October update that we started getting yesterday, if something doesn't work out, you can always do start run, find the old control panel applet to fiddle with things.
Yeah.
And the same applies to SharePoint. If something doesn't work, yeah, I'll go to the old interface to fix stuff.
You don't want to know how often I launch the control panel on Windows 10.
I do it frequently, maybe 5 times an hour.
Yeah.
Five times an hour. Nice.
5 times an hour is a bit often, maybe, but yeah. Steve replies here, by the way, he said for Melissa that he heard that calendar events will be now rolled up to the hub just as news and activity does today. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, calendar is a very specific one that they've done to make that work.
Were there any announcements? And I'm sorry, I will try to pronounce your name, but I will horrendously fail here. Machi, maybe? Sorry for that. My apologies. Were there any announcements during Ignite regarding the list view thresholds in Office 365 Modern Experience, increasing the limit of 5,000 items or allowing indexes on lookup columns? I haven't heard anything about that.
I think I did. I'm just quickly opening one of the decks because I think I saw some hard numbers in there. Just bear with me for a moment. There was some sort of in the content services session. I think they had a huge list of numbers on how things will change, but I can't find it for now. But I definitely suggest you have a look at the Modernizing Content Management with Microsoft Content Services by Daniel Kogan and Chris McNulty. I think they had one slide on that one. Okay,
it's a year-old, century-old problem, almost the 5,000 list item limit. Yeah, would be nice if it could be fixed. They're doing a lot of things on the UI. Almost the pages are almost changing on a weekly basis. Well, effectively, they're rolling out a new release of SharePoint Online every week, so you will see constantly changes happening there. Footer is a sticky topic, literally. You get a sticky footer or you get a floating footer. I'm just curious what people like. Would they like to have a sticky footer or a floating footer, or would they be able to choose? From what I understand, it will be a sticky footer initially now. The footer that is available, the footer placeholder, but there will come a floating footer. So they're working on that, which is good, I think. So you have a choice, hopefully. That would be nice. There's this mega menu coming. If you actually look around in CSUM, the latest releases of CSUM, you already see that property exposed on the web object. You can set it to true. It doesn't do anything yet, but it's there already. So if you dig around, there's actually a tech tip I want to give. If you want to figure out what is coming in SharePoint, have a look at CSUM, the CSUM library. So if you're a developer and you know C#, have a look around with CSUM. Vesa releases every month the latest version of CSUM, and he also lists the latest methods that are coming. That gives away a lot about what is coming, because it usually first appears in CSUM and then maybe in the UI a bit later. So an interesting source to keep track of if you see what is coming and what they are planning to implement. And sometimes functionality is there months before it is actually implemented, which is interesting, because they need that version of CSUM for like early release tenants and etc. Yeah. Exactly.
So there was one question in there.
Yeah.
That said, what is your impression of the standardized URLs for the centers? And it says security, compliance, admin. So I just wanted to like a 2-second on this one. I think this one's fantastic because Microsoft, it's always been a problem that when you would access a tenant, that once you were granted like global admin access, you basically had access to kind of everything. And so what's been nice is now that as they break everything away, so you can go to security.something or compliance.something or the different admin centers for all of the components, we can now start to do what Microsoft have always been really good at, which is role-based access control, to be able to say, well, hey, I can grant these specific people access to security and compliance now, and I don't need to give them access to the Exchange admin center or something else. So when they're changing the URLs and standardizing, it's really based around that as the first objective, how to isolate functionality that's required. So I was using an example that, for example, if you're doing a legal hold or e-discovery, that should be the legal department, not IT. Like IT should have no bearing on what's going on there. But of course, right now, originally a global admin can go in and just do that. And it's like, well, no, I don't need you to do that. So it's nice that now as you go into the centers and you try to do something, it'll say, oh, hey, you don't have the role-based access that's required. And actually, you shouldn't have it in the first place. It should be the legal team. So it's nice that the URLs are changing. It segments everything out easier. So if I want to do OneDrive administration, I just go to the OneDrive site. If I go to the SharePoint one, you kind of bounce around to the different ones. So it makes it clear on where you're administrating and the permission sets that you need to define. I just think that's a nice thing that Microsoft have done to make it easier for us as the IT admins, I suppose, to at least delegate access and control to where it should be.
Yeah. There's a question here in the chat from Ravi. Is there any alternative in SharePoint Online to the slide library in SharePoint 2010? We use a lot of current SharePoint 2010 applications. Now I have to dig back in my history what the slide library was about, but it was about
that was one of the greatest things since slides.
It was fantastic.
Yes.
It was fantastic. Take a slide deck, upload the slide deck, put it all the slides, select the ones you want to have, compile them all back together. It was genius. And then it just went away.
Yeah. The alternative would be now that you embed a PowerPoint file, basically.
And I think the slide library functionality was deprecated at some point.
Yes, yeah. I think this one was officially deprecated. Like it was deprecated and then just deleted. Like it was gone.
Yeah, and there is no modern equivalent of that one.
No,
I probably would. Yeah, the only solution I can see is that you just upload your file to a library and then embed a power. There's a web part that's a file embed web part that allows you to embed a PowerPoint deck on a page. That's I guess the closest you can get to exposing that data.
Wasn't it so that in one of the PNP calls just recently, maybe today, they had the roadmap and they had something around PowerPoint slide reuse?
Let me check. Yeah, there was something about PowerPoint slide reuse, indeed. That part I missed when Wes was talking about that, so I don't know the actual details about that one. He was indeed mentioning there is a PowerPoint slide reuse thing.
Yeah, I know the feeling when Wes is talking, you kind of zone out and start thinking about it.
Well, I talk to him almost on a daily basis, and then you have that effect sometimes.
Yeah, but that's definitely something that I think a lot of companies who have been using SharePoint for a decade now, they are kind of hoping to get some sort of capability around that.
So the interesting thing was the reason that it was originally created was to allow effectively co-authoring of slide decks. So the idea being that, Erwin could work on one thing, Jussi could work on another thing, I could work on one thing, and we put them all together, and then we just collaborate that way. Whereas if you think in the modern world, we don't need that now, because we just put a PowerPoint deck in SharePoint and open it in PowerPoint Online, and we co-author and chat and do the same thing. So when you look at the model, it's kind of shifted away from I'm storing all of these slides and putting them back together again to just we now co-author together. So I mean, the thing you also have to remember is that, for example, Office 2016 doesn't understand it anymore. So Office 2013 understands publishing to like the slide library, so does Office 2010, but they removed it from Office as well. Yeah. So you kind of stuck in, I've got a deck that I want to publish, but I can't publish it because it doesn't understand it now, even if I wanted to. So it's, they truly deprecated that one.
Yep. Irene asks, when can I expect to be able to change the root site collection template to the communication site? It will come, but not yet.
That one's on the list, yeah. On the list.
It will come. Yeah. I know that people have been sometimes very creative in doing things like that, modifying the root site template to a team site, modern team site. Don't do that. Please don't do that. you will end up in problems. I've seen people do it and they end up in problems. So don't try to hack your way around it. Wait until it's fully officially supported and then do it, because you can potentially end up in all kinds of nasty issues with CSAM calls and things go wrong, and you'll end up making a support request to Microsoft, and they will have to fix things, and that will take time, and it's just annoying. So just don't do it. Steer clear from that until it's officially supported. Do not convert modern team sites to modern communication sites. Well, that you can't. You cannot convert a team site to a communication site, because behind the scenes, and that's like something that has been ingrained in SharePoint for like years already, you cannot flip the site definition of a site collection. And there are different site definitions behind the scenes. The modern team site is a group #0, and the communication site is the site publishing pages site # something. It's a different site.
We couldn't use PMP to hack it in there.
No, we can't. No, sorry.
That's a challenge right there. Oh, that's a challenge.
We tried. No. We tried, but no.
Yeah, and I think the use case here is that you might have one team site with loads of content, and then to convert that would be nice, but maybe just create a new one and then migrate the raw data from there and build the communication site to actually be a communication site.
Right. Yeah. But they do, and Steve is continuing his question here, but they do have the same out-of-the-box modern web parts? Yes, they do. Yeah. The web parts are not restricted to the type of site. As long as a modern site, you'll have the web parts available. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're slowly running until towards the end of today. So let's close this up. We are recording this, which means that we will share this video for everyone that signed up. We have your contact information. We will contact you with a recording of this session, so you can actually share this with your colleagues if you want to look it back on the train or on your way home. I would like to thank you for being here. I had a great time. Thank you, Jussi. Thank you, Liam.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, it was, and hopefully again next year.
Yes.
Okay. Take care. All have a good day.
Cool.
Cheers. Bye.
Enjoy your day. Have a good one.